Hey guys, Eric and Roth here to talk about the Walking Dead episode called Remember. So full spoilers to follow if you haven't seen. There's your chance to stop watching, but you haven't, so let's continue. A new location.
A whole new location.
Whole new world.
Which we knew we were headed towards.
Well, yeah. Well, if you read the comics, and also just, recent, well, also the fact that they need to end up somewhere.
Yeah, eventually they will have to land somewhere and be there for a period of time.
Yeah, so, what do you think? This was obviously the big episode. It was about the group and how they are integrating into this community or not.
Yes.
And seeing the sort of different ways people react to it. What do you think of it?
I really liked it, actually. I thought that it was, I thought it was a really interesting new way to look at them and their dynamics. And it served as a quick reminder for how different they would be as people and how differently they would interact with one another.
Yeah.
Were the world to not fall apart, you know? And I thought it was interesting that Daryl stuck out sort of like a sore thumb, like he could not acclimate. He wouldn't even take a shower. At a certain point I was like, does Daryl just not want to take a shower? Because I would have been in that shower so fast.
Daryl, he often plays this role in the show, but he was at his most Wolverine, like X-Men Wolverine in this episode, just like the sort of loner, I don't trust anyone. But when him sitting there on the porch, skinning an animal.
But that's just no reason not to take a shower. But go ahead.
Like he wouldn't in any way. Everyone else had steps and different things, but even Rick, who was so wary of going, was like, I will shower and shave. I will take this opportunity, even if they're totally going to betray us. But Daryl wouldn't do that.
Even if we're next week's lunch meat,
I
will take a shower now and I will be clean lunch meat.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it because, for a piece of me, for a moment, I was like, oh, Daryl feels useless because he's this guy that is so useful when they're out there, and kind of doesn't fit into that kind of community. I loved Carol's subterfuge.
That was great.
Wasn't that brilliant?
Yeah, she's suddenly June Cleaver.
Yes, and that sweet, wonderful man that used to beat me senseless.
Right.
And
I found my role in the group,
I'd love to be a part of the community.
Right. That was really cool. And that, and she was one of the ones who was most sort of like quickly, she was acclimating while playing this sort of game.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I really liked in the episode was that, we presume, who knows? We presume, though, that when The Walking Dead ends, there will not be a cure, right?
Right.
Who knows, a few years from now. But this episode was almost the what if there was a cure? What if life went back to normal? And the idea that this group of characters were basically all suffering from PTSD,
severe PTSD.
Right, because this community was mostly people who'd stayed in that gated community the entire time.
Yeah.
So there was this idea that like they've suddenly taken in these people who are really messed up.
But here's one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about it. And I think it was highlighted most clearly with Carol and Rick. Who did, when Daryl says to Carol, you look ridiculous in that little sweater vest, she does, because that's just not who she is anymore. But they put on these costumes and he eventually put on his little sheriff's outfit, and they're willing to play the role. But the idea of Woodbury and Alexandria, I don't know about Alexandria yet, but Woodbury was this place that on the surface looked really nice, but underneath was just poisonous.
Right.
What they were playing with here was the idea that on the surface, our group that we've been following, Rick and Carol, they'll look really nice, but underneath, they're poisonous.
Yeah.
I loved that last line, and there was a piece of me, I don't think they will. I was like, God, I would love it if they fully explored that idea. Yeah. What if Rick became the guy that was like, well, I'm just going to take your stuff?
Yeah, everyone jokes about the Rick-tatorship, but it's like, what if he's now the bad guy in the situation?
Wouldn't that be fascinating if he became the guy that really just went there because of the trauma that he which you can't totally blame him. What if we were following the story of a dark villain this whole time and we didn't know it?
No, it was very interesting.
They're never going to do any of that.
And I was actually very happy because I was a little nervous that it would feel repetitive after Woodbury, because Woodbury on the TV show was portrayed very differently in the comic book in a way that it was like, well, we've kind of seen them go into this community of nice people. Now Woodbury turned out to be something else. But it still was like, what if this all feels like the same beats of getting to know? But it instantly felt very different because of how edgy everyone was. And I do think the artifice of the camera worked really well because it's so non-Walking Dead. And Deanna, that's her name, right?
Deanna,
She was a cool, interesting presence, very different than sort of the leaders we've seen before.
She
Calm and
was.
collected, and seemed very reasonable, but not in a like creepy governor way.
No, she seems like a legitimately good leader.
Yeah.
You know, she seems like she had by hook or by crook kept this thing together, and I'm sure, you know, but that she was legitimately like good and saying I can read people really well, but maybe not in this case.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I did like in that final moment that they had that kind of that trifecta with Rick in the foreground saying like, well, if we don't like it here, we're just going to take it.
Yeah.
With the two people behind him were Carol and Daryl.
Oh, yeah.
Who are his sort of his consiglieres at this point.
Yeah,
like
and the two who can get as cold and hard as he needs people to be.
Yeah, I feel like Carol is like the consigliere and Daryl's like the brawn, you know? And they're like, the three of them are, the Godfather at this point with my analogy. But, but it was I really loved that. That was my favorite moment, I think, this season. Because I was like, what if he really did that?
And it was also just, I want to point out visually, it was kind of cool because, you know, people had joked about how mountain man Rick had become at this point, this giant bushy beard. Yeah. And it was like very dramatically wow when he shaved and got a haircut. I was recently looking at AMC's press site for photos, and I happened to see season 1 photos and went, wow, he looks different.
Yeah.
So to see him kind of on the surface take back that identity, you know, and put on and look, once again, he's like the sheriff or the constable.
Yeah.
But now he's such a changed guy, and a guy who is kind of calculating and thinking about something that might not be a very good thing to do.
Of course it wouldn't be a good thing to do. I mean, these people maybe, you know, I love the fact that they kept repeating this refrain of like, they're weak. And, you know, he had Carl kind of attack that group of walkers. Like, I'm not going to let my kid get weak. I'm not going to let my group get weak. I'm not going to be weak. Because the weak die in this world. And, you know, I thought it was great because they, without even really talking about it, Carol made the decision to go in and get, at the ground level, get to know this community, to see their weaknesses, to see their strengths, to see what they're up to kind of like be a little spy, right, amongst them. And then Rick is in the perfect position to gain a lot of power in this community, have the access to the weapons, all of that. They really could take it if they wanted to. I don't think they will do that, you know.
Right.
I'm just saying, I think that probably a lot of fans would want Rick to remain sort of the hero of this story. And I think that AMC would want Rick to remain the hero of this story. Like, I don't think
But what if he broke bad?
But what if he broke bad? Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're suddenly going to be like, actually, it's been Anakin all along.
Right.
You know, and it isn't Luke at all, people. But it was an interesting moment to investigate the idea that it could be.
And I liked when he ran into Carl out there. They both sort of snuck beyond the wall. And, they killed those walkers, which did, you know, go from the earlier conversation about not losing your edge. But there was also almost the idea that they almost kind of had to. Like, this is like, it's almost like a hunter who needs to hunt now.
Yeah.
Like
it was an addiction.
Right. I almost felt like they should have high-fived at the end when they wrote, they killed him good. It's like, yeah, good job, Dad. I thought it was all very, very interesting to sort of see that dynamic.
I'm curious, where would you prefer him to sort of, I mean, I think that if I had to predict where it would go from here, it would be Rick said that and he maybe feel that way for a period of time, but he'll slowly care for these people like he does and become the hero once again, and there'll be somebody else to be a villain.
Right.
Do you think that's what's going to happen? Would you rather see that, or would you rather see their darkness really fully explored?
I would like to see it fully explored. The show being the show where it seems like no one is safe except Rick and Daryl, you know, which is just a gut feeling more about analyzing it as a show. It's like, what if someone else does what if someone else in the group is like, we got to take over, and then Rick has second thoughts or something like that? That could possibly happen.
Could possibly happen, yeah. I don't know. I mean, they've said they're going to stick fairly close to the comics. We won't say what that would mean, but
it does seem, you know, and we mentioned this, but it does seem like they are veering back into the comics in a way because they'd gotten way off. Like, they were going to the same locations, but it just so many different things were happening. But now it does feel like we're, with the caveat that some characters have died and not died, that in the comics were different.
Right, and then some characters are so dramatically different on the show that I hope they don't take them in their comic direction because I like where they're at on the show. Right. But we'll see.
We will.
See. In total, I really liked the episode. I thought
Me too.
It opened up some interesting doors. We'll see where it goes from here.
Yep. So let us know. That's what we thought of this week's Walking Dead. Let us know in the comments what you thought and whether you think Rick's going to go full Rick-tatorship on us. We'll be back next week with more on The Walking Dead. Thanks, guys.